We had a couple of tiny technical issues, which is all part of live streaming. But we're only a minute late and we're here, and hopefully you can see and hear us well. Welcome to my slightly Christmassy Santa's Grotto here. I've got Christmas lights up, which is very festive of me, isn't it? So I like to begin by talking about what the premise of the show is, what it's all about. Well, in case you hadn't guessed by the title, it is about franchising, but it's about a lot more than that. So it's a sort of a deep delve into different topics that are related to franchisors, franchisees, franchising, and also business in general, entrepreneurship. That's a difficult word for me to say, but it's related to all of these different things, and how you can grow and scale a business and how you can do that properly. I came up with the idea of doing this because I wanted to add value to the franchise world. I wanted people to be able to make more informed decisions and have interesting conversations and debates about various different topics. I also wanted it to be a space where people can express their views and their opinions. It's not a sales platform, but we talk about what we do. Everyone knows what I do, and we like to link it to what our guests do as well, to add some extra value. So to introduce today's topic, so today we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, and particularly within the world of franchising. So as I said, each week we take a topic and we take a guest. That's all right. I don't mind that sort of thing. It's all good. I reckon a cat will join me soon. That's all good. So we take a different topic and we invite someone in who is interested in that topic and passionate about that topic, and it relates back to what they do. So without further ado, I introduce you to Dennis Berry. A good friend of mine is Dennis, and I've known him for a while. We're connected via a lovely group of people called the Hounds of the Business Hour. You need to check those guys out. And I've had many a conversation with Dennis, and we came up with this topic. It's something he's particularly passionate and interested about, and it forms part of his business. But before I turn it over to Dennis to introduce himself and speak a little bit about the topic, the comments are open. I see that in fact, let's put Omar up on the screen right now. Great to see Omar here. I encourage anybody who is here to comment if you can on the live stream. It's part of a larger body of work. We have YouTube Shorts, we have how-to guides coming out in 2024, and some really exciting stuff as well. So it's great for people to comment live because it drives the show. And I love the comments we get. They're a real deep delve, and they help us have a sort of a direction on the show as well. So it's great to see Omar. It's lovely to see Leslie Flowers, wonderful lady. You need to check out her show as well. She has a show based on this book, Think and Grow Rich. So you need to check her out. We've also got Simon Wise here. Ooh. There we go. We've got Simon here, and Simon is an absolute gentleman and someone I know very well. He's been on the show. He's an expert on franchise recruitment, and he's my go-to on that subject, and definitely have to have him back on the show. So really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. We've also got Natalia here as well, and a franchising expert, letters after her name. So I'm really pleased that you're here, and can't wait to hear your thoughts on the subject today as well. And I will let you talk in a minute, Dennis. I promise you. I need to recognize these lovely people. Leslie's looking forward to the conversation. We've got Ed here. I had a long conversation with Ed today. Real seasoned franchise expert, lovely chap. I could talk to Ed for hours. So pleased you're here, Ed, and can't wait to steal your ideas again. He accused me of that last week. We got Jitin. Jitin is going to be a guest in the future. He was a franchisee at a very early age, so it's going to be exciting to talk to him. And finally, we have Sia. And Sia, of course, you know Sia, Dennis. Amazing to have you here, Sia. You are an absolute legend of the hounds, and lovely to have you here. So we've recognized everyone. Over to you, my good friend Dennis, to introduce yourself, and I'll shut up.
No, you were doing great. I'm not sure how to introduce myself. I'm Dennis.
Oh, well, that's pretty good. And I suppose it's more introducing emotional intelligence and what that means.
Yeah, I love that. That's really great. And emotional intelligence, it's such an important part of my world. For those that don't know me, which is most of you, then I come from a background of sobriety. So I've been sober over 20 years. And I bring that up only because like being sober is not about not drinking. It's about growing up and being mature, taking care of your responsibilities, changing the way you think and act. And then you have a different life. And part of that is emotional intelligence. And people don't really understand what that means. I mean, nowadays there's a lot more awareness around it for sure. But basically what it is regulating your emotions. It's how we react in any given situation in the moment. That's really going to ultimately determine our levels of success or lack of success. Because I think, especially nowadays in the corporate world, business world, entrepreneurship, franchise world, it's business. And you can only get so far doing just business. The rest is managing relationships. I think when you're hired to do a job in any company or a corporation, or I say I'm an entrepreneur, solopreneur, but I have a team of people that I work with, and I'm the leader. So sometimes things don't come out the way I need them to. Sometimes things take a little longer than they needed to, which is most things in business. So it's how you respond to that and how you make people feel when those things happen that determine the outcomes ultimately. So emotional intelligence is a big part of that. Like the old way of doing business was really to like yell and scream and get angry and stressed out and fearful and put those emotions inside of people, but then you don't get positive results from that. It never really worked, but especially not in 2023 and beyond. So it comes from mindful living, from being aware. We can't change what we're not aware of. And I think there's a lot of good, positive influence around emotional intelligence now. So I'm great we're having this talk to start things off.
Yes, me too. And I've been writing down a few things that you said there. In fact, it was Ed today that said about the fact that I often quote something, which is listening with intent. And I'm going to fully admit that was absolutely from you, my friend. And it's something that resonates with me, I think, every week that I do this show. So I needed to credit you with that.
I don't need to, but it's an important piece. Active listening. Yeah, listening with the intent of having an emotionally intelligent response rather than what can I say to make you understand me better, which is where most people come from.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing that you said just then about how you make someone feel, people are emotional beings, aren't they? They buy with emotion, they make decisions with emotion, and my dad actually said to me once that sometimes you should take emotion out of things when you're responding. And it was a really interesting thing to say, right? And I get it, because sometimes you need to sort of take things back to the facts and try and respond in a way that is calm and you've thought about it and you're not just doing that. But also emotions they're in all of us. But that's, I suppose, emotional intelligence, because you're controlling that. You're not letting something get you angry or make you too negatively impulsive, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And I think you also said, did you say can't change what you're not aware of or something like that? And that's a good thing to You've got to be aware of things, for them to be right or wrong. Just before we continue our conversation, I just wanted to make sure that we're recognizing the people that are here, because we are all one big group. And what's wonderful about these conversations is, as I say, they're driven by people that are in the audience and on the screen. We're all together. So we've got Tim here as well. Tim is a fantastic chap, franchising expert. Fantastic to have Tim here. He's going to be a guest on the show towards the middle of next year, and really looking forward to having a chat with Tim. So looking forward to hearing what he's got to say as well. Hold on, let's press the button properly. Natalia says, bravo, Dennis Berry. Franchising is all about relationships, and it's so important to recognize. Yeah,
it really is.
What do you think?
And I would offer that, everything we do is relationships. It's business, personal, it could be franchising, any type of business in the corporate world. It's all about managing relationships. Mm-hmm. We can't have a business without other people. If there's no sales, there's no business, and sales come from other people. So we have to manage those relationships. And if we're not managing our relationships well, then we're not really going to have a business. Mm-hmm. or a personal relationship either. I used to do a lot of addiction and recovery and codependency. I worked with a lot of teens doing counseling, and always what we talked about, like I'm gonna relate it to our relationships to my experience working with couples. It was really great. It was that you can have a couple of really successful people, and if we're not aware of our wounds, I did a lot of work around childhood wounds. We're all wounded people, and the idea is that we need to be aware that we're wounded. And these wounds come deep from when we're little kids. It could be like when we were 6 months old, we wanted our mom to pick us up, but she was busy in that moment. She was washing the dishes and she couldn't pick us up. And right then we get wounded. Mm-hmm. And that's like an abandonment wound, a rejection, a betrayal. And so when we're kids, we start crying because that's what we know how to do to cover up that wound. But as we get older, we stop crying. But then maybe we start drinking to cover up that wound when we're abandoned. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we start yelling or treating people like crap. We don't listen to them intently. We order them around. We try to invoke our opinions onto them. And that's a lack of emotional intelligence. And if we're not aware of these things, then we can't fix them. And most people are not aware. Mm-hmm. So I like what we do, I love what you're doing on the show. I love the way social media really uses. A lot of people nowadays on social media, they're using their platform, their influence to bring awareness to this type of stuff. So we realize that, trying to, if things aren't going the way we want them to, if our business partners, if our spouses, husbands, wives, or kids aren't behaving the way that we need them to, if we start yelling at them or treating them less than, or some other type of emotional reaction to their behavior, we're not going to get what we want out of it.
No,
it doesn't happen.
You're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. It's a journey of trust as well, isn't it? Ed's made a point here which it'd be interesting to have a look at. He says, Dennis, do you think that a brand is able to demonstrate the traits of emotional intelligence online? That's really interesting because you talked about people and how we feel, and is that possible for a brand to encapsulate emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question, because most people, when we think of the word brand, we think of a visual brand. A Nike Swift, the Golden Arches, the Starbucks thing, whatever your brand is. But the brand goes much deeper than just the visual part. That's the logo that we see. And on a surface level, that's all most people see. But the brand is like the way you answer the phone. It's the way that your people-facing employees treat people. It's the way they greet them. Like when you go to Starbucks, they ask, Starbucks is just crappy coffee. It's the same as the coffee you buy down the street at the
You're not allowed to
in
mention
the-
Starbucks here. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I know, but they have a
Yeah,
they have a
of
marketing.
course, yeah.
So if
And
you
they
do
never
that-
get my name right as well. I think it's a classic
Yeah, so
Starbucks, isn't it?
maybe they need to work on that. But the branding is all part of the way we respond to people. And you know, every business has problems. Like if you can keep, 80% of the people happy, then that's a really high percentage. So it's how do you manage to do that is a big part of your brand as well. And not many people manage to do that.
No, I think you're right. And it's always interesting the way the 80% comes up in all sorts of things, isn't it? But it's a really interesting number when we talk about this 80-20 thing. But you're right. If you can keep people happy, I was before the conversation today, I was having a little bit of a look at what emotional intelligence meant. And, there was a few words that I thought was really interesting. Empathy was one that came up. And I really like that one.
That's a big.
Trying to really understand. As a franchisor, we want to, or my job, I feel, is to really understand what someone's dream is. Because even if you've got an offer that is consistent and it's the same as part of having a brand, the way it can be applied to someone who wants something from their life can slightly alter. So I think it's really having empathy to understand what it is they want from owning a franchise. And some people want, a multi-site, they want to effectively own a big business that they're at the top of and directing that business. Some people just want 1 or 2 units and they really want to immerse themselves in that business, that brand. I've spoken to several people over the years that are in, I don't know, the medical or the scientific fields, and they're stuck in labs or offices, and they just want to sort of feel that. And when I say feel it, I said to someone what was their dream about a coffee shop, and they said they wanted to see the sun come through the windows, smell the coffee, and know their customers by name, make their staff feel good. And they built a picture so vivid in their mind. It was so important to understand what that picture was, because then when you're trying to align with them and trying to show empathy with what it is they're doing, you have a much better chance of getting that right, I think, if you're asking those questions. What do you think about that, Dennis?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, empathy is basically kind of the definition of emotional intelligence. It's trying to understand where people are coming from instead of trying to be understood, because that's where our reactions come from. It's like if I tell you something or ask you something and you're not understanding me and you do something differently, how do I respond to that? So do I have emotional reactions or non-emotional responses? So if we're there's lots of words people throw around like woke. Are you woke? Are you aware? Do you have that understanding of how you're behaving? And most people don't. But the empathy piece is like, all right, instead of me trying to force you to understand where I'm coming from, what if I try to understand where you're coming from? Maybe I can explain it better. Maybe I can get my point across better if I understand where you're coming from. That's what empathy is, and really what emotional intelligence is. And I think that the best leaders now, and by leaders, it could be a franchise owner, it could be a CEO, it could be a solopreneur. The best leaders understand this, that whenever they're talking to somebody, they try to come from where they're coming from to get them to understand what they need. And if we can't do that, we're going to stay stuck. You can only get so far on skills and talent alone. Beyond that, we call it another thing. A word for emotional intelligence that people use is skills. That's like a popular word that people understand. Like if you're a computer developer, than you the skills. Whatever job you're hired to do, there's hard skills that you're hired to do for that job, and then those can only take you so far. But to get beyond that, to get all the way to the top, you really need to manage your emotions and understand the people around you, and that's empathy, for sure. And look at Steve Jobs. Look at the best entrepreneurs on the planet. They have an understanding of what their people need. Richard Branson was really great at that. Take care of your people. Your people will take care of their people, and then they help build your business.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think it doesn't take, it does take a lot, but sometimes you can do some really simple things to understand your people better and have empathy. To genuinely ask a question about how someone's doing, or even just to say thank you, even just to say you've done an amazing job. If that comes from the right person, the value exchange on that. I was on, and I need to recognize Don Cohen, but I was on Don's show and we were talking about return on investment. But the value exchange for saying thank you, or you've done an amazing job, or if you're a franchisor and you're talking to a franchisee and you're just saying, look, you've done a really good job here. You're representing our brand so well. We're going to use you as an example here. It's fantastic. Get them excited about it. It's really, I think, interesting to do that. I'm sorry if I'm looking over here as well, but I have I'm multitasking here, so I have a couple of I've got a laptop over here because some of the comments for some reason don't appear on here. So I just wanted to recognize a couple of people who are on the chat, but we can't put their name up here. So we've got Chet Patel, and that's a new person on the show. So really want to welcome you, Chet, and thanks for being here and giving your thoughts. He's put awareness, empathy, regulation, skills, motivation. Some great words there, which I think we'll probably touch on as we go on. Kersha Campbell as well, which I need to have a call with this lady, but she's put mastering emotions is so critical to growth and your own personal success. Looking forward to this. So brilliant to have you here as well, and looking forward to you continuing. Just before we move on with any other points, we've got a couple of points that I want to put up on screen so we can have a bit of a delve into these. So Leslie, so glad that Leslie's here. As I say, Leslie does Think and Grow Rich and has read that book 90 times. So an absolute seasoned expert on that one expression today. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Fifth habit of highly effective people, Stephen Covey. Yeah. What do you think about that one? To be honest with you, you encapsulated that. That's what you said. Understand other people first.
Yeah, and that comes from that. I think it's the Saint Francis of Assisi prayer, where help me to seek not so much to understand, but seek more to understand than to be understood. Mm-hmm. Because again, most of the conflicts, if you have a lot of times when you see troubled marriages or relationships, it's because they're both trying to force each other to understand their point of view instead of trying to understand their partner's point of view. And I'm using marriages as an example because all of us can relate to relationships there. But again, like I said earlier, everything we do is a relationship, a business relationship, personal relationship, sexual, all those things are relationships.
Of course.
And they all relationships involve emotions. So like you said earlier, which is really awesome. One of the things I would do with clients when I was doing a lot of the couple codependency work was to recognize when you're in the loop. I called it the loop. And I'm sure we can all relate. I know that we can all relate if you've been in a relationship longer than like 6 months or a year, is that you get into a quarrel and then you're trying to explain your side, she's trying to explain her side, And then you get to this point where you're repeating yourself and they're repeating themselves. And then they're trying to get you to understand. At that moment, you're in what I call the loop. And it's because emotion has gotten high. Now, once you start arguing with emotion, you're never going to find the solution. So what I say is that we have to bring awareness to it. And what I would tell my couples to do is be like, all right, look, stop. We're in the loop. We have to identify that we're in the loop and recognize that nothing good is going to come from that until we remove the emotion. So we could say, all right.
That must have been what my dad was talking about then. Yeah.
Yeah, we can say, all right, we're in the loop. We have 10 minutes to figure this out. If we can't, then we'll stop and then we can go get something to eat. I'll see you tomorrow. We can talk about it again next week, but we have to stop now because we're never going to get anywhere.
Absolutely.
And if you could do that in every relationship, it'll really make a difference.
Yeah, and business relationships, like you say, are a relationship. I always talk about the fact that a franchisee-franchisor relationship is a relationship of building trust, but all relationships are that, and as I say, I think you take emotion out when it's a tense situation. That's what my dad was talking about. If it was ever an argument or a stressful situation, he would take it out. But you put emotion in when you're passionate about something, when you're excited about something, so, and that's emotional intelligence, isn't it? Balancing and deciding when you can do that. Just quickly before we continue, let's recognize a few people that are here and a few people that have made some fantastic comments as well. So, excuse me. Tell it's live. Could have edited that out, couldn't I?
No, it's perfect.
So Simon has said, how much does EQ play a part in the franchisor-franchisee relationship when ultimately it's a commercial business partnership relationship? I think we've touched on this, haven't we? And it's a really interesting one because, relationships, personal relationships and business have differences, but they also have a huge amount of similarities, especially with something like the building of trust. If that trust is broken in a personal relationship, it's hard to get around and past that. If it's broken in a business relationship, it's exactly the same. You need counseling to get over that and to get around it and to restore that trust. Couple of things I wanted to say, because the lovely Sia has answered a question here that we had. So I'm having some trouble here with comments showing up, and I didn't know what it was, but Sia has answered the question. So if anybody out there is making a comment on their mobile devices, the comments may not show up here on the live stream. And that's something that LinkedIn, I'm sure, are doing their very best to sort out. And Sia is also very kindly, I really appreciate this, Sia. And those from the desktop, if you move away from the live stream, click on another browser tab, your comments get stalled and will not populate. Looks like no one is commentating. So if you are here and commenting, I'm trying every possible way to see them and recognize you, because it's so important to me. Even send me a message, send me a LinkedIn message or a WhatsApp message, and I can recognize you from there. What we got here? We've got a comment from we've got Johnny Joseph, and Johnny is a legend. He's going to be on the show. He's a franchise auditor, and we've got a fantastic episode coming up called "Don't Worry, It's Just a Franchise Audit," which I think is going to be a fantastic one. So really looking forward as well to hearing what you've got to say, Johnny, about emotional intelligence and how emotions as well come into play in a business relationship. I'm going to put a comment up here. Maybe Dennis, you can have a little look at this one as well. I'll read it out. Do you think businesses and franchisors in particular demonstrate more emotional intelligence and empathy towards their franchisees as opposed to their employees, as they want to grow at pace. Most franchisor teams tend to be small, yet they are building the franchise group at scale. What do you think about that? Do you think, I mean, I appreciate franchising isn't exactly your area, but do you think, I mean, on a franchisor or franchisee basis, there is a relationship, and on a employer-employee, there is a relationship. It's definitely different. I think there is, because when you get a franchisee, you're often getting an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur has a different outlook than an employee. So I think you have to make sure their ideas are valued within the framework of a franchise. I think it's definitely a challenge because you get someone who's passionate entrepreneur that wants to bring their own ideas to a franchise. And the reason that they are investing in a franchise is to use a proven model, is to use a model that's been tried and tested. But if you've got some flexibility there, or at least a framework to be able to listen to those ideas, then I think that you can perhaps overcome that. What do you think about that, Dennis?
Well, it seems that, and this is kind of an outlying view, almost a paradox, but it seems almost like the franchisor is working for the franchisee. I think it should be more like that. It's kind of like leaders are really working alongside their people, not on top of them, not above them. And I think that taking that approach, I think that's going to have to be the approach in the future, is that you're working alongside them. Not I'm your boss, it's my franchise company that you're buying into. It's like we're partners here. And so I think the best franchisors probably have an understanding of that. And yeah. I think it's the same relationship.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you've got to value the people around you so much. I mean, so many of the people, and especially the hounds and lots of people I know on LinkedIn, are all about bringing other people up, you know, and concentrating on making other people shine. And I think if you have that thought process of you're there to facilitate other people, then you can, I think you can have great success. Quickly before we carry on, we've got a few people here that I'd like to recognise, and we've got some lovely hounds. We've got to recognise some hounds. We have Mike Ashbrainer here. He is a fantastic and wonderful chap. He's a big part of the hounds. I'd like to say leader of the pack, but we are all there together, and that's exactly what he does. He brings other people up around him. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen him create a post that isn't about somebody else. An amazing chap, and you need to check out the hounds and the supports that you get there as well. Well, that's very nice of you, Mike. You are a legend. Thank you very much for saying that.
Well, can I use that, what you just said, as an example of what I just said? Is like, yeah. So the idea of the franchisor, it's not like I'm your boss, this is my company. It's like, let's work together, because when you're successful, I'm successful. And Mike operates the same way. It's like Mike came up with this idea of the hounds, and he's technically like the leader of the pack, but we're all on the same team.
Yeah.
When we're successful, he's successful. Exactly. And when the best leaders understand that, when you lead from that standpoint, we rise by lifting others. It doesn't work any other way. It may seem like it does, and that's our egos talking when we're trying to move from that standpoint. Yeah. And a lot of people struggle when they move from that point.
Yeah.
But not Mike.
No, definitely not. And not any of the hounds, and so many people that I've met on LinkedIn. Kelly, who's doing the Awesome Journey after this show, Kelly Steinecker, she always lifts other people up. Don Cohen, Don is always about other people and about collaborations, about community and about lifting other people up. And if you can just go around being a reflector and making, as a franchisor, if you are a reflector of your franchisees, and if you just work in bringing them up, making them successful, making them feel good. We've talked a lot today about how you make someone feel. And I've said this before, but if you don't remember anything else about someone, you will remember how they made you feel. And that's really important. So if as a leader, you can excite and motivate and understand and listen and show empathy and have compassion, and all these wonderful words that are associated with it, you're going to see some really fantastic results. What was that? Interesting. This is from Simon. Do you think we will ever see an EI clause, an emotional intelligence? So I like the way we've abbreviated that now. It helps me in a franchise agreement. Wow, that is a really interesting point. That really is interesting, because you spoke earlier, Dennis, about these soft skills, and they're a lot harder to sort of, if you're looking for a franchisee, what's the mindset? What's that person you're looking for? It's easy to talk about, I don't know, maybe experience. It's easy to talk about financial credentials, but it's harder to gauge emotional intelligence, but it's equally important.
Yeah. And to answer that question, I think it's we have to put things in the right order. Like what you just said is great. Like the soft skills, people are looking for hard skills. We're like, are they qualified on paper to run this franchise? Are they qualified to work for this business? Are they qualified to do this and that? What we really should do is say, are they a good fit? Are they a good fit for this relationship? If they are, then we can train the right skills to help get where we want to go. Because if you move from that standpoint, if it's a good fit, we're saying, is emotional intelligence there? So we know beforehand, are they aware? Do they have the ability to regulate their emotions? Are they operating from a place of empathy, or are they operating from their ego? If we can tell that before we hire them, we're going to have a lot less problems. It doesn't need to be in the clause. It should just be the way that we operate. We hire for character, we train skill.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to be quoting that one as well. But that's brilliant. And I think if anyone out there is a franchisor or is an entrepreneur and looking at franchising as a way of scaling, listen to what Dennis has just said, because it's really key to try and understand that. And all of the other things, they can come, but if they're a good fit, and I've written that down as well, if they're a good fit, that's really, really important. Just want to recognize a few more people here and bring a few more comments in. So before we go, because there's a few really interesting comments, but I just want to recognize a few people here. So we've got Raquel, another wonderful member of the Hounds, and a lovely lady, and need to have another conversation with Raquel as well. So great to have you here. Absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your support. I also want to recognize the fact that we've got Garfield Chatwin here, another franchising expert. Absolute honor to have you here today as well. Really want to have a conversation with you and get your thoughts on things. Hopefully you can be a guest in the future as well. But the best motivators use emotional intelligence. Often they don't realize it. Now that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a personality too. I mean, I think it can be trained and cultivated for sure, because we're not necessarily born with the awareness, but the best leaders have this awareness, and they move from empathy and kindness and love. And when you move from that standpoint, like if you move the intuition of the old style of leadership, it was that command and demand. It was like, I need this, and if people were falling short, they get yelled at, scolded, punished, whatever it is. All that does is it drives fear into their beings, and they're less productive. But instead, if you get down at eye level not from above. If you lead at eye level and help them solve the problem, then we all become successful together, and they become more motivated to become better.
Mhm.
So it's really just about awareness, and the best leaders know this already. And in fact, there's all kinds of, and there's even coaches on LinkedIn doing like EQ trainings, corporate trainings, executive coaching, all that stuff. That's what this is. I mean, it's helping people with hard skills become incorporate soft skills into that so they can lead better. That's what all this is.
Absolutely. I'm just going to bring up a comment here from Simon. Is emotional intelligence implied within a franchise agreement? Is it an expectation on the part of the franchisor in dealing with franchisees in a dispute situation, for example? Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think it is. I don't think it's touched on a lot. It's such a key in business, but it's very hard to package it up in a agreement. But I think that as a community, we need to work together, I think, to bring emotional intelligence to the table and to work out a way in which it's easier for people to understand emotional intelligence, to understand who's good at that and who's not good and who is a good fit. But I think at the moment it's probably relying on the skills of the people within the organizations to see whether people are a good fit. Maybe you've got a checklist. You know, some of these things can be run with checklists. But I think it's about having those conversations at the moment. So what I think and what I love about this show and what I love about the conversation being driven in this way is we haven't necessarily got an answer to that, but what that is a great question, and what that is a great point for the franchising community to consider, and to work out a way to effectively bring that into the discussion and come up with a solution that means that we are considering emotional intelligence in a better way. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it really needs to be part of the process beforehand, right? It has to be. Like I do investing, like I do and I do like value investing. I don't know if you know what value investing is, but it's basically like studying the companies, really knowing these companies on a deep level before you invest in them, and patience. Like patience is such an important piece of the puzzle. And when you have usually with a franchise, since this is a franchise show, when you have a franchisor, they're anxious to find somebody to give them money to get into the business so they can start making their dreams come true, and then people buying a business model. But there's not a lot of patience there. There really needs to be patience. So if the franchisor is actively interviewing and actively listening intently to the person, you can tell beforehand if there's going to be problems. If you're not on the same emotional wavelength, then there's going to be problems. So patience plays a deep part, and that's a big part of emotional intelligence. So if you understand that and you're patient and don't jump into a deal just because you need money, that's where most problems happen. So if you can step back, remove the emotion, say, is this really a good fit? Have patience before you dive into these relationships. You're going to become much more successful in every area of your life. Same with dating. It's like we don't want to be alone, so we grab somebody who's okay, and then all of a sudden, 30 days later, 60 days, you're like, this is awful, because we weren't patient and have solid boundaries in place.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. I think I've written down the word patience as well. I think it's really important. Really important. You know, people rush into these things, don't they? We've got a comment here from Natalia, and it says, I always say that this is a system of mutual benefit. A franchisor can only be successful if its franchisee are successful, and the franchisees can only succeed if the franchisor provides the support. Yes. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's not I'm your boss. It's we're partners. There's somebody like there has to be a figurehead up top there and somebody to keep order. It's just that's people need to be led. But leading doesn't mean commanding or demanding. It just means like, all right, we're on this team together, and then this is how we do this, and we work together. That's
you're right. It's inspiring and nurturing, isn't it? Leading, listening, inspiring, nurturing, making other people shine. And yes, when you said about looking at people eye level as well, that's a great metaphor for this, in this win-win situation. And I think even in negotiations as well, when you're at that beginning stage of a franchisor or franchisee relationship where you're talking about that, you want to negotiate something that is a win-win. Both people have to be successful, and both people have got to be comfortable with what they're agreeing, and they've got to understand it, understand the agreement, but understand each other as well. And this emotional intelligence plays a huge part in understanding one another. So I think a great point, Natalia. Just have a look at a comment here from Garfield. Legal frameworks are non-emotional. That's really interesting, actually. And I'm going to throw this one across to you. I'm conscious of time as well. We've probably got around about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd like to have a bit of time at the end to wrap things up. But we've got a couple of other comments to get into here. How do you think that emotional intelligence can be brought into situations where emotion's hard to bring into it, like a legal framework? What's your take on that?
Well, it's either there's the awareness or there isn't. And I think it's okay. There are certain things that require more attention. Some things require a softer touch. I guess if you're getting into legal frameworks, like when I picture legal frameworks, I picture sitting around a table signing papers and having lawyers present, and it's like, and so that's a non-emotional scene. It needs to be, because when you start getting emotions involved, then we have our ego fighting, trying to protect this, get people to understand my point of view.
Yeah, you're right. This is interesting though, because you were talking about earlier about sort of kind of couples disputes and relationship counseling and so on, and that even though there is partly in that there's a legal breakdown of things or a legal arrangement, it is a highly emotional situation here, and Garfield's followed up here by something that I think is really interesting. It is difficult for emotional intelligence to be part of a legal agreement, but a legal agreement is there for, unfortunately, maybe when things perhaps don't go the way that they should, and you're relying back on that. And when that happens, when there is a disagreement, that's when emotional intelligence comes in. And that's exactly what Garfield's put here, that the emotional intelligence comes in to the dispute resolution, not the legal agreement. So Garfield, that's fantastic, because not only did you ask an amazing question, but you just answered it as well.
Well, and I also think that goes back to the very beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because if it was a good fit, then you have two people that are capable of resolving it non-emotionally.
Yes, completely.
And if you're just hiring, this all goes back to the beginning. If you're hiring based on a financial decision, and it's not a good emotional fit, and then something legal comes up, then you're going to have that type of result, because you have two people that are emotionally mismatched. But if you have two people that are a good fit, that are emotionally balanced, that know how to regulate their emotions and lead with empathy, then you can resolve conflict much easier. So it all goes back to the beginning, for having the right people around you all the time. In every area of your life. I was taught to have experts in every area of your life, or people that you're compatible with. I've cut people out of my life, friends from 30 years. I've cut out of my life because they were, somewhat toxic, but just we weren't moving in the same direction. And people grow at different rates and in different directions. And it's okay. Sometimes it's just time to, there's just not good fits for everybody.
Absolutely. We've got a couple, we've got 50 minutes. Let's see if we can get through a couple of these comments, because as I say, I love it when people get into these conversations and, really adding value, and it goes both ways. You just said something there, which was emotional balance, which I loved as a statement, and this shows about balance as well. We all are adding value, and we're all gaining something from it. We're gaining value by discussing these topics together, and this is a shining example of that today. I'm really proud of being part of this community and really enjoying these conversations. So let's just bring up something here by Tim. Would you say that just as in dating and choosing a life partner, recruiting franchisees has to be done very carefully, which will ultimately make it easier to create the right atmosphere using emotional intelligence? Yes, I mean,
it's all identical. It's the exact same thing, and people don't equate it to that, because it's like with a romantic relationship, you have sex. It doesn't change things. It's the same relation. They're relationships, and relationships have different features, but at the foundation, there's still just relation. All relationship means, you ready for write this one down, is your ability to relate to somebody.
Yeah, I will write that one down.
That's all that it is. It's relationships. How do you relate to somebody? If you don't relate to somebody well, I would stay away from 6 or 7 figure deals or business operations with them, because it's not going to go well. You can kind of predictable behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what's really interesting, and going back very quickly, and we've got one more comment, but going back very quickly to Garfield's point about legal frameworks and dispute resolutions. I had a conversation the other day, and obviously I can't go into details, but I had a conversation with somebody about a contract. But the conversation was all about how we would deal with things together and what would happen. And it was a real conversation just about a scenario that might occur. So yes, there was a legal framework, but there was absolutely a discussion about emotional intelligence, because we were talking about how the partnership would handle different difficult situations. So it's a really interesting conversation to have about the sort of, we're going to have a show all about legal stuff and all about finance, and I'd like to sort of bring those two things together. We've got one, I think we'll probably make this the final comment here and have a little bit of a wrap up, but Jamie, fantastic guy. I'm glad Jamie's here as well. He's a franchising expert, and love to chat with Jamie, but he's got great conversation to be had, and a conversation that needs to happen more. I agree with that. No matter a company's values, it takes is one person in the chain to lead without emotional intelligence to upset the car. Yeah, it does. It really does. Well, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think an entire team has to show emotional intelligence, or can there be some chinks in the armor in terms of that emotional intelligence?
No, they're 100% right. It's like buying fruit, like grapes or whatever. If there's one bad grape, it'll spoil the whole bunch. There's like sayings about that, and it's really true. And so the best, well, I mean, you want to hire. Again, it goes back to early relationships. You can tell in the interview process: hire character, train skill. Mm-hmm. Now, if you get to this point where something changes, or some people grow and some don't, then you have to aggressively handle that situation. Otherwise, it's going to spoil the whole company. If you have a 7-figure company and there's somebody who's not a team player, who's not aware or has the capability to have handle emotional disputes, then they might need to go. You have to take steps nowadays to maybe help them understand and try to get them to be able to fit in. But then if not, then we have to let them go and protect the team. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot more at stake here.
I think that's really interesting that you said about that, about how you hire based on character. and train skills. It's a whole nother subject. I think we'll get into this one, but resumes, whether that's a resume for if you're getting a job or a resume for if you're trying to be a franchisee. It really is. It should be something that tells your character, not tells what skills you've written down. So I think really interesting. I mean,
and Ed Purnell asked a great question. Is like, are there thoughts on how to identify those that are emotionally intelligent? There are some really excellent tests, personality assessments that most really big companies now, they implement those tests before hiring somebody. And that's there's like a 3 or even a 5-point hiring process. And early on, they take these personality tests that weed out people that would not be a good fit for the organization. So I highly recommend those. I mean, it's a couple $100 a pop to have those people take that, but it can cost you 10 or 100 or $1 million to hire the wrong person. So it's worth spending a couple $100 on an assessment and a good interview process to make sure you're hiring the right fit. Or buying or inviting somebody to buy your franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and maybe, like you say, because I've had to fill out some of those tests. I seem to remember them.
Yeah, they're there for a reason. They're great. They're kind of a pain in the ass on our end because it's like, I have to do this test that's going to take a half hour or an hour. But at the end, it's really beneficial for both parties.
It's a really good idea. Again, Ed, I'm going to steal that idea. So great to have you. Great to have you here with your ideas. I'm going to finish. I keep saying I'm going to finish up, but you know what? Today's been such an amazing conversation, and I just don't like to miss off anything that everyone's saying. So we're going to keep going for a little bit here. Why not?
Sure.
High levels of emotional intelligence is an important attribute for most franchisee-facing roles. We recruit for, and can I get that? I can't get the rest of that up. Why can't I do that? Can you see the rest of that one on your screen, Dennis?
No, high levels of EI is an important attribute for most franchisees facing roles we recruit.
Oh, there we go.
I think that might be.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think by having that test, by having something that we can put in place to assess emotional intelligence and tweak that, like you say, that may cost a couple of $100 or pounds, whichever ones we want to use here. But if it does, it could save you thousands, and it can save you a lot of heartache as well. It can save a lot of negative emotions, and that's what emotional intelligence is, partly making some of those wise choices. But look, I think that's it. We've got one quick one from Ed, which is probably, he's responding to me saying that I'm stealing his ideas, but that one wasn't his. So look, I think we're going to wrap it up now. It's been, as ever, an amazing conversation today, one that I've got true value from, and as I say, it's been an honor to be part of this and really enjoying it. What I like to do as well before we finish up is I just like people to have an idea as to how to get in touch with you, what sort of things that you can do for other people that are in business or looking, to improve their emotional intelligence or in their leadership. Is there a good way of getting in touch with you, Dennis?
Yeah, and the very best way is on my website, which is dennisberry.com. And what I do is I help coaches, therapists, and business people, entrepreneurs of most types, optimize and monetize LinkedIn and their business without wasting time or money. And a big piece of that is the emotional piece, because we all have certain skills that can get us to a certain level, but without managing our emotions on a daily basis, it's really hard to get to high levels. And so and it's not just how to build a business, how to monetize your LinkedIn presence, how to monetize your business. It's also how to manage this on a daily basis. Because if we don't, we're gonna struggle at some point, because there's highs and lows, and then there's people managing emotions. There's big wins and big losses and everything in between. So that's what I do. And I love talking to people. So you reach out anytime.
Perfect. Well, absolutely. Definitely reach out to Dennis. I can't recommend Dennis high enough. So, and the same name as my dad as well, my late dad. So that's good as well.
I'm honored.
That's it. Well, look, it's been fantastic. We will be back as ever next Tuesday at 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And I believe next week we have Kevin Ayres, I think. And Kevin is a fantastic chap. And he does everything to do with franchise. Yeah, I am right. Yes, Kevin. So he does everything to do with video content and media within the franchising world. So it's going to be a really fun and interesting conversation. So I hope you can all join us next week and look forward to chatting again. But until then, goodbye. Take good care, everyone.